Good afternoon and welcome to Close-Up on this Mother's Day, which marks just over 17 weeks from another big day in New Hampshire, the primary. We continue our commitment to the issues and races in 2002 with an ongoing series of candidate profiles in this half hour of Close-Up. Today we meet the man who is challenging 2nd District Congressman Charlie Bass. Republican Eugene Douglas lives in Concord with his wife Carol and 2 sons. He's a high school science teacher and a newcomer to the state. He moved here from Hawaii in the recent past. According to his website, Mr. Douglas is a pro-life Republican who moved to New Hampshire, quote, to help Bob Smith get reelected. He ran for U.S. Senate in Hawaii in both 1998 and 2000. Welcome, Mr. Douglas.
Thank you very much. Before
we actually get to meet the journalists who are joining us today, we want to give you a minute to tell us why you are running for Congress.
Well, growing up in a Quaker liberal Democratic family, I've been following Republican politics and appreciating it for years, ever since I registered to vote when I was 18, and I registered Republican. And I did it on purpose because I frankly thought that the Republicans were standing for something and did not, in a sense, want kind of a ruling from on high kind of mentality, but more a constitutional view of how people fit into society and government fits in. And we came to New Hampshire expecting to be involved in Republican politics behind the scenes, but I've been following it for 20 years since I was a graduate student at UConn, and always appreciated the congressmen and senators from here. And yet when we moved to Concord, thinking we had all Republicans that we agreed with, I found out that the current congressman, on some very important issues to me, as well as to New Hampshire Republicans, votes with the Democrats. And so, based on my own history and my own going in there for a cause, I decided that if not me, who else? And because no one else was going to do it, I decided I'd do it. And I felt it was very important as a teacher, go out there and educate the public as to what Republicans believe, and that's what I'm doing it for.
All right, well, great. Before we get to some more questions, I would love to introduce our panelists today. Joining me to my right, John DeStaso of the Union Leader.
Hi, Jen. How are you?
Good. Thanks for being with us. And Dave Leventhal with the Eagle Tribune.
Hi, Jen.
Hi, Dave. Well, I know we have some questions lined up here, but I'd love to start, Mr. Douglas, by asking, you've acknowledged you moved here from Hawaii. It's been about a year or so since you've been here. You know, when Hillary Clinton moved to New York State, she was criticized for seeming to move there to run for Senate. How do you fight that argument here in New Hampshire? You're a newcomer.
Well, as I said, my dad's from New London, Connecticut. I'm a real Yankee, and when I was going to UConn, the only Republican politics that was attractive to me was in New Hampshire, from Senator Gordon Humphrey to Senator Bob Smith to Bill Zelliff to Senator Gregg, and before that Congressman Gregg, and even I remembered seeing on the radar Chuck Douglas, and I remembered saying, oh, he's a 1S Douglas. So it's the kind of thing where it all brought to mind why I liked Republican politics and those people who I looked up to and appreciated. And yes, we moved around the country, but I'm a teacher, and basically we had a wonderful opportunity to teach out at the College of Micronesia. I was teaching down in Florida, where my dad lived at the time, and I got recruited out to teach on a small island in the Pacific. And I don't know of any college teacher that, given that opportunity, they pay the moving expenses, wouldn't do that with his family. And it was a great adventure for us. And we moved to Hawaii so my wife could get her bachelor's degree in art. And then we got involved in Republican politics there because I decided to take on Senator Inouye because of some very complicated things about my own experience as a chemist. And so it's a situation where, yes, it's complicated, but it's very simple. That I'm a purist Republican, and I frankly think that Republicans in New Hampshire are great people, and all the people in New Hampshire are great people, but that's why I'm involved in Republican politics. And when we came here, I saw that Representative Bass did not represent my views and a lot of conservatives in the district, so I decided, well, I'll take him on. See how things go.
Has the party given you the time of day at all? Because the party officially is supposed to be neutral in these things, but of course Congressman Bass is a veteran and an incumbent and a party person virtually from birth. How do you intend to sort of deal with what will obviously be the Republican Party's favoritism toward the incumbent?
Well, frankly, I think once they see, and particularly the important Republicans, once they see that there's some spine behind the bluster that I use, and the fact that I stand for something, particularly regarding what the platform of the Republican Party stands for in these issues. If I could just read a few little things. It says, we therefore support a human life amendment to the Constitution. We endorse legislation to make it clear that the 14th Amendment protections apply to unborn children. We oppose same-sex marriages. We ban partial birth abortion. We oppose physician-assisted suicide. All those are my beliefs too, and it's a situation where as people get to know me, then they'll understand why I'm doing this, because they don't represent Representative Bass's views. Part of the problem in politics is that they almost have a kind of a fiefdom of, you know, if your father or grandfather was in politics, then you should be. And it's kind of the Kennedy syndrome. And in some respects, Charlie Bass's politics is just like Ted Kennedy's. So it's a situation where I don't think necessarily there's a birthright to political office. We're not in England. And there's no House of Lords. So it's a situation where, for me as a science teacher with 2 master's degrees and a great family, I think, according to our Constitution, I'm entitled to run for office. And it really doesn't matter what the politicos at the Republican Party say, because once they come to understand what I'm doing here, they'll rally behind me, particularly if I win. And I frankly think I've gotten this far on so little, quote-unquote, money because I have a message and because people are interested in the message and they talk about the message. If I didn't, I'd be go out bragging how much personal money I have to spend, and I don't have any money. I'm just a science teacher.
What about the voters of the 2nd District who, over the past 8 years, have consistently voted Charlie Bass into office over some very well-heeled Democrats, and no conservative has really risen up to ever challenge him? Is that any indication to you that the 2nd District, the people of the 2nd District, are more interested in a more moderate Republican as opposed to a conservative? And if not, how do you, without any money, plan to actually get your message out and try to convince people that your message is right?
Well, Dave Wheeler, a very conservative Republican, beat him in a primary, and Chuck Douglas and Judd Gregg have also beat him in primary. So it's a situation where, and I think they're more conservative than he is, so it's a situation where basically just because he's beaten Democrats means that people in 2nd District would prefer to have a Republican. If he wins to go on the general, I'll vote for him, but I'm not going to support him in the primary. And just because there aren't Republicans who care enough about the issues to stand up and be brave in a way, this is a very scary thing to do this. And yet, if I lose, I'll still be a science teacher. If he loses, who knows what he'll do. But the point is, it's a situation where basically I think that the time is now for a change. And this district also has not been known for having congressmen there for 30 years at a time. They get upset, they get things for all sorts of things, and I don't think it's ready for a Democrat to upset him, but a conservative Republican can, particularly when he infuriates his base by voting for unconstitutional legislation like Shays Meehan and, in a sense, votes against the Pinkerton Amendment, which was about basically protecting the rights for New Hampshire gun owners to support the candidate of their choice, as well as there are a lot of pro-life people in the 2nd District who've been waiting for a real person who's not afraid to say, yes, I want to protect innocent human life, and that's why I'm in this. And I think I will have a lot of support. And they won't see it necessarily until after the filing stops, but people are talking about me all the time and wondering who I am, and I'm very thankful for this opportunity.
One thing you mentioned, Dave talked about party support, as did John, but you filed an official complaint recently asking Republicans to follow the state party rules. Is it your sense that they aren't, that they're somehow supporting Charlie Bass?
Well, part of the bylaws basically say if you're a party official or you're part of a committee, you've got a responsibility to be neutral. And yet there are some people in the party committee apparatus that have made it clear they were supporting Charlie. If I was not running, and I wasn't running 6 months ago, sure, they were supporting Charlie, but yes, they need to be convinced, but now they need to be called to task and to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm in here and I'm serious. And I think once people become more and more serious, then they realize they'll have to step back and to say, yes, let's let the primary run its course. The problem is with Representative Bass is, I've had a website ever since November, active and has stuff on it. His website isn't even working. So it's like, if he doesn't care enough about this district to put up what he's standing for, it's the kind of thing where it's just plain weird. And he votes for campaign finance legislation to reform the system, but he doesn't even follow the rules of the FEC himself. It's just a kind of hypocrisy I don't like, and I think once people become aware of it, they won't like it either.
All right, well, we're going to toss to a break, but when we come back, more from Eugene Douglas. Thank you. Commitment 2002 in terms of profiling the candidates running for major office. Today, we are seated in the studio with Eugene Douglas, who's a Republican, taking on Charlie Bass in the 2nd Congressional District. And we've been asking him some questions, and we're going to turn it over to John DeStay. So, John?
Mr. Douglas, just tell us a little more about where you think Congressman Bass has voted like a Democrat and has been non-reflective of the voters. I mean, the president has supported him himself. So I think there's really no one that's always 100% with the White House or with a certain point of view. But what about him is the most troublesome to you? What are some of the votes? You've mentioned campaign finance reform. Any others?
Well, just a few weeks ago, he voted to say it shouldn't be against the law to bring minor children across state lines to have abortions. And to me, that's appalling. It's almost like in Massachusetts, where they have a law that says parents must give permission to have a minor have an abortion. There are abortion providers in Massachusetts bringing minor girls to New Hampshire to get abortions because there isn't that law here. And it bothers a lot of Republicans, the fact that he does that. And it overwhelmingly passed the House with bipartisan support, mostly Republican and some Democrat, and he voted against it. And basically what that does is it advocates kidnapping for the sake of killing a baby. And that to me is abhorrent. I can't picture that. And I don't believe it represents the Republican Party in New Hampshire, and I don't believe it represents the things. He also voted for domestic partnerships with the District of Columbia to support them with federal funds. And yet, look, I don't have a position about people's personal lives, but taxpayers shouldn't be used to subsidize people who want to shack up. They have their own choices. Common law marriage for heterosexuals, and it's basically, if they want to give each other power of attorney, that's fine, but I don't think they should get government sanction and make taxpayers pay for it, and he voted for it.
If Charlie Bass was opposed to abortion rights, would you feel the need to run in this election?
No. Frankly, that's what I expected when he came here. I was not looking forward to being a candidate again, maybe for 6-10 years down the road. As I said, as you mentioned, I've been a great fan of Bob Smith ever since he entered the U.S. Senate, and before then when he was a congressman. He's a very honorable man, and I think he deserves to be reelected. I'm proud to support him. I also think that Johnson Jr. is a great guy, and it's a situation, running for the Senate as I did before in Hawaii against very liberal Democrats' positions in a sense. It didn't matter where I came in, but the fact that I did that, I can understand, why I would run against Charlie, and yet I can't understand why he's doing it, because he's essentially, I think it's basically people want him out of the House, and they don't care if he wins or loses. They just want him to get out of the U.S. House. And I find that tragic, because I think he could be a great senator 6-12 years down the road, and yet I think I'm 44, he's 37, and I think I may have learned some more things in my Senate races in Hawaii, standing up and getting some notice. And
what do you think of Congressman Bass not taking sides in that primary between Senator Smith and Sununu? Well, some people see that as a slight to the incumbent, and that led to speculation that perhaps some people were asking you to sort of be a thorn in the side of the congressman. You don't strike me as someone who's going to allow himself to be used in that way, but what do you make of that whole situation?
Well, frankly, I don't think incumbents should be involved in primary politics. It's kind of unseemly. And just because I'm a candidate, but I've always made my preferences for Bob Smith to be clear from the beginning. There's been no things, but I like Johnson Jr. I think he's a great guy, but and yet Charlie Bass not taking a position when Senator Smith endorsed him 4 years ago. It's kind of odd, but the way he votes in Congress, and Bob Smith votes very pro-life, doesn't surprise me he doesn't support him. He wants him out of the U.S. Senate. He might even want June Sheehan to replace him. I don't know. I have no idea.
Norman Jackman has agreed to a debate with you. If I'm correct, he's running, of course, in the Democratic primary. Why debate a Democrat at this point when you're still running in a Republican primary and have that race in and of itself to deal with before you would ever have to think of the general election against a Democrat?
Well, he was on the show a couple of weeks ago and had a lot of comment in the Republican circles about it. And I felt, being a Massachusetts lawyer from Harvard and whatever, it'd be fun. I'm a college teacher, and I thought it'd be educational. And whether Representative Bass or Katrina Sweat want to join, I thought it'd be fun. And initially, when we met at McDonald's, he thought it'd be fun too. But who knows? He basically, I've been forced to now invite Katrina Sweat to join us, and so it's a situation where who knows what will eventually happen, but it's not by my lack of trying. I basically feel that whenever the issues are discussed and on the table, then people really know who they're voting for, and that's what we need in the 2nd District. It would also be great in the 1st District if Sean Mahoney challenges Martha Fuller Clark. You know, get some noise, get some interest in there.
You mentioned that you have proposals for lowering taxes and for making government smaller. Can you talk about your proposal for lowering taxes?
Well, last night I was at the Portsmouth Business Forum sponsored by Craig Benson, and I asked the guys on the panel, what kind of interaction or relationship would you like to have with the state and federal government? They said none. Well, that's my view too. The federal government's job should be to support the infrastructure, to look for the national defense, to make it easy for business to provide jobs for people, not make things messier. And frankly, the way Representative Bass votes on two sides of the issue sometimes and kind of interferes with what President Bush wants to do in Congress, it's a situation where I don't think he's much of a friend for small business either. So that's the kind of thing where, you know, I feel fairly strongly about it. And yet I also, as a teacher and as someone who worked in the industry and gotten one patent, it's the kind of thing where I believe that there's a role that the federal government does play in providing for higher education as well as a wide variety of infrastructure needs.
Well, you also mentioned you have a proposal for local control of education. How does that work in with?
Well, basically what it means is that the Department of Education in Washington gets kind of disbanded, and any role of regulatory thing gets put into a different group of more an advisory thing of setting basic standards and then letting local states, localities, local school districts make policy within a certain framework. Like, one of the things that's tragic, New Hampshire is great in the fact that at least with 2 master's degrees, there's an alternative credentialing procedure. But most places in the country, if you have a master's degree in a subject area or even a bachelor's, you can't teach at the high school at that level without going back to undergraduate school. And that's a national problem, and yet part of the bureaucracy in the Department of Education promotes that kind of educationalist attitude about it instead of getting people who love science in there to teach it, or those people who love math or history to get in there to teach it. And that's my idea of if the local people know what they want, they should be allowed to hire them. And that's a school district matter and even a principal matter.
You must detest the Bush education plan then.
No, I don't. I think what President Bush is trying to do is making a silk purse out of a sow's ear. Frankly, I think he's doing what he needs to do to get it back to local accountability, and yet trying to work a way to kind of work through a morass of regulations and barbaric stuff that comes out of Washington that's been entrenched there for as long as the Democrats were in control of Congress. And I think he's a pragmatic guy who deserves kudos for what he's been trying to do. And that's one reason we've been supporting President Bush and even his father for years, because they are very pragmatic politicians.
How does Charlie Bass, be it in his votes or in his outward leadership on the issue of terrorism, how do you think he's done in the past several months dating back to last September?
Well, kind of quiet. I like Bob Smith's view on terrorism and basically Senator Gregg's leadership on the issue, Johnson Jr.'s leadership on the issue. I think Representative Bass, sure, he's parroted the other view, but I don't think he necessarily disagrees with the Republican position.
Anything that he should have done that you see him not doing?
No, I just don't see him as being that kind of guy with public statements in a way. He's a very nice man. He has a 67% thing with the American Conservative Union, so I would vote the same as he would on many things. But the prime issues about why I'm in this race is why I'm in this race. And basically, I think it does not represent New Hampshire. It does not represent the 2nd District.
So you said your main issue was, however, was the choice issue. Was the
No,
choice issue of your pro-life issue. Well, I thought you said you wouldn't be in the race
Well,
if he were pro-life.
if he were pro-life, that's a matter of killing little babies in the womb. It's a situation where, to me, that's enough to get me in there. It's not enough to replace an incumbent. I'm a Republican. I'm not in here to replace incumbent Republicans with another one. That makes me different.
And all I was going to ask you was, what sort of federal legislation do you see yourself sponsoring? What can be done on the federal level and the congressional level to deal with that issue, as opposed to, say, on the state level?
Well, it's in the New Hampshire. It's in the New Hampshire Republican Party platform. Basically, a human life amendment to the Constitution that brings back that the U.S. Constitution says that the Americans have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That applies to the unborn.
All right, I'm going to take a break now, but we will be right back. But before we go, we want to give Republican Eugene Douglas a chance to, in about a minute or so, summarize anything you didn't get to say, or kind of why you feel you're the guy for Congress.
Well, because this is showing up on Mother's Day, I want to say, one, thank God for the mothers that decided to keep their babies alive. That's why I'm in the race, to protect the babies and to, in a sense, ask all of you out there who are concerned about it to pray for the mothers who are hoodwinked into taking their baby's life. Yes, it's an important issue, but human life is an important issue, and yet it's a situation where all I'm doing is giving New Hampshire Republicans a choice and those who care about it a choice, and I really need your help. Yes, I don't have many resources, but I think I got the grassroots foundation I need. I feel I'm entitled, and my positions are clear enough that I can ask for your money, your support, and I really need people's help. And yet, as I said before, if Representative Bass wins the primary, I'll support him in the general because he's much better than a Democrat.
All right. Thank you, Eugene Douglas. And I want to thank both of you. John DeFacio with Union Leader, Dave Leventhal, Eagle Tribune. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And do want to let you know that you can join us again next week for a close-up doubleheader where we profile two back-to-back shows, two Republican candidates running for Congress in the 1st District. We'll meet Jim Steiner and John Stephen. That's next Sunday on Close-Up starting at 12:30. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great one.